Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, April 1st. Great to have you with us this week. There are many reasons why our school districts have reason to be concerned about their funding. We'll talk about it. But there's only one governor in Ohio now, and he's set to make a landmark decision with the stroke of a pen. But we're down to two when it comes to Akron's new police chief. The numbers game and great conversation next on NewsNite. This time of year, school districts always concerned about how much money they'll actually get from the state and what's at stake. Earlier this week, Jody Miller had a chance to sit down with Akron Superintendent David James and Revere Treasurer Dave Forrest.
Let me also tell you, I think people are frankly surprised that in this budget, in basic foundation aid for K-12, based on state support last year, we have slightly increased spending for K-12 education for our kids.
From our perspective, it is not. And I think it's important to say that the funding formula in Ohio has always been a political formula. It is not a methodology for determining how to properly fund schools. And it's a redistribution method not only to other schools, which may be appropriate, but also to other state budgets areas, if you will.
David, you concur?
When you look, if you look deeper at the numbers, when you look at just our segment of our budget that comes from foundation formula, that will increase slightly. I think to the tune of a little over $5 million. But when you look at the tangible personal property tax, that's going to go down almost the same amount. So in one situation, yes, there has been some increase in the formula funding, but on the other hand, some of the revenue streams we've had access to are going away. The other thing we're very interested in and we're still researching is transportation was a separate line item, this year, and, we were hearing that part of that or the entire amount has been merged into a funding formula. So there are lots of things we still have to do research on in terms of exactly what is in the funding formula and what it's supposed to pay for.
Stress levels very high at our school districts. A lot to talk about this week. Great to have along Steve Hoffman from the Akron Beacon Journal, and also great to welcome freelance journalist and contributor Jody Miller. And Phil Trexler from the Akron Beacon Journal will join us in just a few minutes, but let's begin with the schools. You talked with these guys this week. They are very calm about this, but there's a lot of stress involved.
There's an awful lot of stress involved. I mean, Eric, when the governor in his town hall meeting said, we've basically increased a little bit the state aid, and then they started crunching the numbers, as I said, both in that interview and in my blog, the numbers don't lie. And for school districts around the state, they're finding that they're going to be losing money, and they're going to be losing a lot of money.
And this shouldn't be a surprise, though, should it, Steve?
Well, this is like any other budget projection. There are any number of ways to project budgets, and what the governor did was to project it in a way that looked favorable for him and his Republican allies in the legislature. The first set of numbers they put out looked at state aid, the basic formula aid. And what he forgot to say is that the starting point needs to include the federal stimulus money, which is not there anymore, and the starting point for comparative purposes moving forward also has to include the tangible personal property tax that we've had, which is being rolled back at a faster rate. The Republicans, Kasich and the Republicans rolled back, and this is property tax money from business inventory and some utilities that was local money. It was local property taxes. So it's how do you compare this? Well, when you put everything into the pot and look at it, it's a loss. It's not an increase, it's a loss. And it's a bigger loss than many of these districts expected. So they're caught in this situation. They either have to go back to the voters, which no one wants to do, or they have to scramble with some tools, but the governor's not giving them a terribly lot of encouragement, in my opinion, more lip service, to find ways to gain greater efficiencies.
So what are they going to do, Jody?
Well, it's going to be interesting. I'm not sure what they're going to do because Steve is absolutely right. The kind of money that they're going to lose is not the kind of money, Eric, that you can make up by consolidating services. Remember that schools are a labor-intensive business, if you want to call them a business. But keep in mind, students are not widgets, so you can't do this. And when 75 to 80% of your general fund budget has to go to salaries and to benefits, you know, that's the big crux there. So you can consolidate services in terms of, like both Dave Forrest and David James talked about, working with other entities, working with other school districts to collaborate on maybe utility type payments or transportation type of issues. That's kind of nickel and diming what has to happen, and I know that contractually some of these school districts have agreements in place with their labor unions that they cannot break. I know in Revere's case they have gone to the teachers, even though it's not a contractual year, and asked for more concessions. And they're getting concessions in terms of no salary increases, no health, you know, more contributions toward health insurance. But it's just they're really stressed, and what's going to happen is it's going to come back to the locals again.
As it always does.
Well, this is timing, as they say in politics, is everything. And he's dropping the bomb. And Jody's right. In the short run, it's very, very difficult to drive the kind of savings, to get to the number that you need to get to in the short run without laying people off. I mean, that's just, it is what it is. School districts are very labor-intensive operations. Your money is really in people and their associated costs, pension costs, and health care especially, which inflates. So in the short run, you're really in a tough situation. I would argue in the long run that there are opportunities for very substantial savings. We have way too many school districts in this state. We have way too many small districts. I know in some of the rural areas you have to have smaller districts just because of the geography. But that said, we have a ton of districts with around 1,000 or maybe a few more pupils. These small districts are carrying a tremendous administrative overhead, and there are also opportunities for pooling, especially when it comes to health care. But again, if you have a contract with a group of employees that includes health care, and that contract is still in effect, you can't just say, oh, well, sorry, you know, we're going to abrogate this whole thing and jump in with 10 other districts or whatever to buy insurance. I mean, this is something that's going to happen slowly over time. Transportation is another big one. Right. I mean, you have all these little districts with their own buses, their own bus garage and all that sort of thing. There are savings, but you got to work at it. And it's going to take longer than 2 years. Our budget's for 2 years, and it's going to take longer than that.
Hold that thought real quick. We get into the big picture of intent. What's the intent of all of this? Dave Forrest had a chance to weigh in.
If we do not fund schools appropriately and provide those opportunities for K-12 education, what is going to happen to the state of Ohio? And I think it's going to decline further. And I think that's a crucial concern I have is for Ohio to come back, education needs to be strong, and we are going in the opposite direction from a funding perspective.
Forrest says we're heading in the wrong direction. Other educators say that this governor really does not support public education as a concept to begin with. If this is the way they feel about each other, how can they be working together going forward?
Good question. Really good question. The interesting thing was that after I interviewed both of these gentlemen, we were talking off camera when the interview concluded, and they were talking about one of the governor's aides saying that, you know, maybe what we need to do is put 50 kids in a classroom and have a computer. You know, and again, I talk about the fact kids are not widgets. You need to have bodies in the classroom. You need to have smaller class sizes. This is what has proven to be an education model that works. You know, you cannot educate kids and expect kids to pass the kinds of testing that this state does and requires in terms of showing that they are learning without having those teachers in the classrooms. And again, the teachers are what costs.
This is going to be a fight. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we have an administration and a conservative blocks in both the House and Senate that are headed in another direction in terms of education policy. There's no doubt about it. They want to expand vouchers. They want to expand charter schools. And there is some rumblings about computers, use of technology, which is...
it works in some cases.
There are private charter schools that have embraced this. And what they're doing is they're driving money eventually out of the public school system into parochial and private schools. I mean, that's sort of the bottom line here. And it's under the guise of choice. There are also some Republicans that are talking about really expanded open enrollment, just basically blowing this concept up and starting all over again. In other words, that any child in Ohio can go to any public school anywhere. It doesn't matter. And obviously that sounds good, school choice, but I mean, everybody can't go to Hudson High School. I mean, you know, physically they're not going to fit. So it's one of these things that sounds good. Vouchers and charter schools sound good to some people, but to me the proof is in the pudding, and so far the data show that charter schools and these experiments we've had with vouchers and charter schools are not delivering the educational results that are any better than the public schools.
Governor Kasich is a business guy. He's a Wall Street guy. Any business manual you ever read says, start with the end in mind. What's our goal here? And if our goal is educated Ohioans, why can't they work backwards and find something that's actually going to work and realize it's going to cost to reach those goals?
Well, they want to dismantle this. They have started dismantling the evidence-based model.
Exactly. And that's the one that shows that does work, has proven to have worked. That, you know, and the problem here is, and like David James says in the interview, you know, if the schools are given the latitude to do changes, to make operational changes, that would work fine. The problem is there are so many regulations under which they have to operate. They don't have the flexibility to go and try some new things.
Okay, we're going to talk more about that as we shift the conversation now to NewsNite.net.
For more NewsNite content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at NewsNite.net.
Again, you can watch the extended edition of our discussion on NewsNite.net, as well as Jody's full interviews with David James and Dave Forrest. Steve will be back in a moment, but great to have along Phil Trexler this week from the Akron Beacon-Journal. And it wouldn't be a discussion this week without a chance to talk about Senate Bill 5. With a stroke of a pen, Governor Kasich did what he said he would do with the support of the Ohio House and Senate. Senate Bill 5 is law.
It is law.
And now
It
what?
is law. Well, and now what? What happens is that the opponents of Senate Bill 5 have already put together an organization called We Are Ohio. They are going to fulfill whatever regulations they need to in order to get this issue as a referendum on the ballot, which means they have to go around the state, collect 231,000 valid signatures to place this issue as a referendum on the November ballot. As long as the governor signed it, as he did last night, they've got enough time to do this. They have 90 days, I think it is, in which to get those valid signatures and then place it on the ballot. So it'll be a very interesting campaign.
How will police, fire, and others respond to this in the short term?
With their pocketbook, you know, they're talking about already spending. They're going to spend up to $20 million in advertising, campaigning against, in favor of overriding the Senate Bill 5. And I think that's what you're going to see. You're going to see tons of ads leading up to the November ballot, and law enforcement, firefighters, and everybody. They're going to rally together, and they're going to put their best foot efforts forward to get this overturned. It's going to be very interesting November election in that respect.
But as far as their attitudes, not that they're not professional in what they do, but how does this affect them doing their jobs?
I hate it. I talked to Paul Helinski yesterday about it, and he's predicting that by the time their current contract expires in 22 months, that 70 to 80 guys are going to retire just from to get away from the impact of Senate Bill 5. You know, the law enforcement, they struggle a lot already with the scrutiny, the day-to-day job that they have to endure, and then they're getting smacked in the head with Senate Bill 5, and they're losing, you know, benefits that they fought for and the rights that they fought for, and they're struggling to come to grasp with what reality is, and you know, it's tough, and they're not happy down there.
From my perspective, there is no question that there needed to be some balance, and that's what the governor keeps talking about. We needed more balance, you know, and his point is, you know, we're not cutting salaries, we're not destroying health care, we're not taking away pensions, but this particular bill is overkill. They could have, I think, the Republicans showed, and I'm disheartened because the Republicans, I think, having a majority in the House, having the governor as the head of the state, and having a majority of Republicans in the House and in the Senate, could have done some changes, made some changes to the collective bargaining law. that we're not overkill, and that's what I think this bill is. There are things about this that I think are so egregious. The no more binding arbitration, and granted that puts cities and communities in a bad situation when somebody outside of the realm of this is going to decide. But right now what's going to happen is that a city council can make a determination of what is the best offer that they're going to give to their employees. And if that doesn't work, it can go to a vote. You know, can you imagine people in a community voting on whether or not they want to increase the salaries for their firefighters, for their policemen? You know, it just really, in my estimation, is a bad bill, which is why I think the Democrats and public employees around the state are in fact going to fight as hard as they can against it.
And while state leaders say this is dollars and cents, Phil, how do the people affected not take this personal?
They do take it personally. You're digging into their pocketbooks. You're digging into their bank accounts, their retirements. You know, the game has changed. They signed on for something. They've negotiated through collective bargaining certain benefits that now the governor comes into office and months later he's taking it away. It's certainly personal to them. I think it's going to be interesting to see what the public when the public weighs in on this thing, to see how they react and do they side with labor, or do they side with the governor on this?
Now, they're accused of, they've had the Cadillac of pension plans and all these perks over the years, but to their credit, oftentimes they were given these perks in lieu of raises over the years that now that many of them claim that, well, if you're going to take these away from me, I wish I'd have taken raises.
But the economy has changed so much that no longer are their salaries lower than the public sector. You know, anybody who's making over 50 grand a year, they're under scrutiny now because, Joe Sixpack is out there, he's hurting. He's struggling, and finding anybody who's lost a job knows the difficulties in trying to find a comparable position with comparable salaries. They're just not out there any longer. And people who are in public office, public sector jobs are making more money now than the regular guy, and they also have their Cadillac benefits that are going along with it. So
well, and that's where I think there was a balance that was needed. Okay, yeah. When the private sector is paying over 23% of their health care costs, and the public sector is paying 9%. Okay, bring that more into a balance. But don't entirely, cut the legs out from underneath public employees. And that's what I think the Republicans did in this particular instance. And that's why I think it's egregious and why there's going to be a lot of fight. This bill does not create, in my estimation, jobs, which is the first thing that needed to be done in this state. Find a way to create more jobs. Find a way to grow our economy. I don't think this bill does that. And for that's what I blame the Republicans on. They have a job to do, and I think Ed Esposito last week talked about this. They've got a job to do. That's why they were sent to Columbus. The collective bargaining law that they have literally destroyed with Senate Bill 5 is not going to, I think, make a really large difference in this state.
So they needed a hammer, but they got a hand grenade?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's like killing a gnat with a sledgehammer. They didn't need to do that, and I think that the electorate I think the electorate will speak not only this November but the following November.
If it goes to, well, we know it's going to end up on the ballot. Can they repeal pieces of it, or is it all or nothing?
It's all or nothing, as I understand. All or nothing.
So if they repeal it, Phil, did we get anywhere? Are we back to square
one? I think
one?
you're back to square one, and I'm sure Kasich will make another run at it. I think it's going to be a close vote. You're talking about people going to the ballot, and they're going to be deciding, well, essentially, should I keep things status quo? And I don't know that the people who are struggling financially themselves are going to side with the public sector. I don't know.
There's a big distraction in all of this, and I want us to talk about it as we shift the conversation now to NewsNite.net.
On NewsNite.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNite.net.
I want to thank Jody for taking part and welcome Steve back to the discussion. We are now down to two, as you have found, Phil, in the search for Akron's new police chief, and they're both from out of state.
Yep, and it's going to be the first police chief hired from outside the department. That's what everybody inside the department is bracing for. You got a major from Prince George's, Maryland County Police Force, and you have an FBI undercover chief based in D.C. Two fine candidates. I've looked at the resumes of both guys. nice career in law enforcement. Both would take a retirement to come here, and both would take a pay cut, essentially, to come here, although they'll both retire and collect a pension and whatnot.
Cost of living might be a little better here.
Cost of living a little bit better here. James Nice is the FBI guy. He's a Kenmore grad, UA grad, and I'm hearing that the leading candidate might be actually the Mr. Major Morris, who's out of Prince George's. But the news broke this week that he is actually suing his own department over a change in position. So I don't think that will bode well for his application. But we'll see. We're expecting some kind of decision here in the next several weeks from the mayor.
Since we haven't met these two guys, Steve, how do you sell this to the public as this is a good idea to go outside the department?
Well, I think we've had a history, recent history in the Akron Police Department of some unfortunate confrontations in the community. We've had some this whole debate over a police auditor. We've had the Justice Department come in and look. So we've had a certain degree of turmoil. I mean, I want to be fair here. I mean, Akron, to me, is not necessarily a crime-ridden city. We have a police force that does a good job, that's professional. But we have had this degree of turmoil below the surface. Sometimes it's erupted. And I think there has been some thought, certainly in City Hall, that it's time for someone to come in from the outside, a fresh set of eyes to look at this problem. Maybe I've heard suggestions, perhaps someone who's not going to be there for a real long time, maybe if just, finish out their career a few years, kind of put things on a different keel, which I think might be necessary. It might be a good idea. Somebody coming in from the outside won't have the baggage, won't have the conflicting loyalties and that sort of thing, so they'll be able to look at this fresh. The other thing that's happening, so you sort of have that track. You have the turmoil in the department, need for an outsider to come in with fresh eyes. And the other theme here has been the regionalization of services. I know everyone's sick of me talking about this, but there's no doubt about it that we have tiny, inefficient police departments scattered all over the place. There is a move, and will be a move, toward consolidating police services, regionalizing police services. Obviously, the police chief in Akron and the sheriff of Summit County are going to be the drivers of that.
Phil, what does it take for the rank and file, though, to accept either one of these guys? Time,
I guess, and an open mind. They're not happy about the mayor's search outside the department. They've made no secret about that. They're offended by the process. They feel as though, as we've said on the show a couple of times, that there are captains there who believe that they're more than adequately qualified to take over the position. But Steve hit on it, right? I think it is about regionalism. That's where the mayor wants to go. It was interesting that Drew Alexander was part of the selection committee who was meeting with the candidates. They want somebody who's going to work with Pasqualek, who's going to assist in this regional concept of police work. And the guy the major from Prince George's County is already working in that sort of a department. There's like 1,800 sworn officers. It's a county-wide law enforcement department, and I don't think that's as radical as Pasqualek is imagining, but he wants someone with that sort of experience to be able to facilitate that
Day
switch.
one, though, this guy takes over. He has no deputy chiefs.
No, but he's got captains there. I don't know. Those are titles. I think too much is being made about that. He's got some. He's a handful of captains who have been there for 20+ years, who are essentially deputy chiefs. They just don't have the title.
No title, no pay, even though they may have been doing those jobs.
They're doing the jobs, right, and they're providing the leadership, and they're basically manning the fort for the last 2.5 years while we've been looking for a chief.
How long's the honeymoon on this?
I don't know. From what Phil's saying, I'm not as close to the police department. I don't know if there is a honeymoon here, but what I do think is going to happen with this new leadership is I think the new chief, whoever it is, has got to come in, and you got to begin pushing. I think in several different directions. The regionalism certainly is one of them. The community policing, better relationships with the community is another one. But I think the trick is to It's like anything else in politics. It's not that you have a good idea, it's you have to convince everybody else that actually it's their good idea too. And so I think part of this is going to be developing relationships with the rank and file, with the officers, the leadership, and kind of moving this thing along. So I would hope that we don't have too many bombshell announcements right off the bat. Here's the directive from my office. We're all going to march this way now. That it'll be more collegial than that. But it's tough to move any bureaucracy. I mean, it's tough to move people in a different direction. That's what the mayor wants to do. I think that's what the city council wants to do, kind of move in some different directions. But in this case, I think I'm a fan of gradualism.
And I don't think you're going to see a great deal of change, because you got to remember you still have a union contract there, and that's
right.
That dictates a lot of what movement that the new chief can make, and he's still going to have to get along with the new chief's going to have to get along with the union, and they're still going to have a great working relationship in order to affect the changes that the mayor wants.
And when will we see the decision made?
I'm hearing sometime this month in April.
Yeah, I mean, and some of this flexibility depends on Senate Bill 5. I mean, clearly, this is a fight, as we've said, this bill will be on hold once these petitions, once this petition drive gets underway. The bill is put on hold until there's a vote of the people. So theoretically, Senate Bill 5 could never affect anybody. But if it does eventually survive, you will have this flexibility on the management side to start changing the way a lot of things are done. A lot of things will not be negotiated anymore, including how many guys you can have in a police car, all those kind of things. That'll be, we're going to do it this way.
And we'll talk about that, and we'll hopefully have the new chief on as well in the coming days. Yeah. Steve, Phil, and Jody, thank you all, and thanks for being with us. Again, you can watch the extended edition of our interviews as well as our discussions and read Jody's blog all over on NewsNite.net. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you next Friday for NewsNite. Good night.